Bienvenidos. Welcome to Conversaciones de Salud. I'm Carmen Robles, aquí para servirle con mi compañero, our youth apprentice journalist, Jesús Rojas.
Buenos días para todos, por aquí Jesús Rojas, junto a mi compañera Carmen Robles.
Estamos aquí muy orgullosos to welcome you to our wonderful show about research. This is a time of uncertainty for science and research, and so we're very excited to have our guests join us today from Partners for Pain over at the University of Minnesota. And if we could please have our guests. Hi, ¿cómo están? Bienvenido.
Muchas gracias. Estoy bien.
Gracias. With us today, we have my co-partner in Conversaciones de Salud, Strong Mind, Strong Body Foundation, and Community Youth Journalist, Youth Community Journalist Institute, Eric Ortiz. Buenas saludos, Eric. ¿Cómo estás?
Great to be here. Thank you, Carmen.
Great. I'm going to introduce our guests, and then we're going to come back and learn a little bit about each and every one of you. We have Dr. Brent Leininger. Excuse me, Brent. Could you please pronounce your last name?
Yeah, Grandpa always said Leininger, so I go with that.
So what Abuelo says, we'll go with what Abuelo says. Thank you, Brent. Brent is a principal investigator for Partners for Pain. And we got my pal here, Douglas Kennedy, PhD and assistant professor, co-investigator for Partners for Pain. Hi, Douglas.
Hello.
¿Cómo estás? And so Douglas is part of the Partners for Pain committee that I belong to as a community member. And we've had lots of conversations about research and the importance of it, especially as it relates to pain. With our background work on opioids and fentanyl, it seemed like the perfect partnership. I'd like to bring in Jesus so he could share with us what we expect to learn from this webinar.
Okay, thank you, Carmen. Thank you, everyone. So what we're going to learn is to break down big ideas into everyday language and questions like, what is research and how is it different from Googling something? How do research do they work? What are their daily life like? What happens after a research study ends? And who can be involved in research and how?
Gracias. Thank you very much. So those are the top 5 items we want to take from this webinar. And this is one of a series of webinars that we'll be doing for the next school year, hopefully. With that, I'd like to turn to our researchers, and we want to get to know you, researchers. We want to know what research is. Can you tell us what your team is working on over at Partners for Pain? And most importantly, could you please tell us why you are a researcher? May we start with Brent?
Sure. So maybe I'll start with the last question first. Why am I a researcher? So you might notice one of the funny initials behind my name is DC. So I'm clinically trained as a chiropractor and originally got interested in research when I was doing my schooling at chiropractic college. Because as you can imagine, there's a lot you have to learn, and it starts off with some of the basics, the knee bones connected to the hip bone, that sort of thing. And it's pretty cut and dry in terms of, what things are called, what they do, how they function together. But once you move into the clinical side of it, I was noticing there's sometimes definitive statements about how things work and what works for what, and sometimes less definitive. And it got me really interested in, well, how do we know what works and what doesn't work, and how people progress through different conditions and what the outcomes are going to be? And that's what really introduced me and got me interested in research, especially when you start to learn that a lot of the things we say as clinicians, some of it has very strong evidence and science backing it, but a lot of it, it's based on just experience and what's been handed down over the years from generations of clinicians. And so I wanted a better understanding of what was based on, repeated observable experiments and what was more just clinical that was passed down. And so that's why I got interested in research and started pursuing a career in it.
Brent, how long have you been in research? How long were you a chiropractor, and then when did you make that switch to research?
Yeah, so I was practicing, and the careers overlapped for a little bit. So I had my own clinic in a small town in southeastern Minnesota for over 10 years, and then started probably about 5 or 6 years into my clinical career, started getting involved in research, undergoing training, getting a master's degree. And then once I started doing training in a PhD program, that's when I left clinical practice and focused solely on research.
And why Partners for Pain? Was that your first project, or? Actually,
it's Partners for Pain is probably the 5th or 6th research project that I've worked on. So it's been a progression, So we do a lot of work on pain management, given background as a chiropractor. So a lot of studies on neck and back pain, how to best manage it using different approaches. And one of the, chiropractic's what's called the complementary and integrative health treatment. And so there's not a lot of research around complementary and integrative health treatments. It's growing over time, but it's an area that, when you compare it to other more established treatments, often has less emphasis and less done in the past. And so I was working in that regard. And then with Partners for Pain is really kind of the next step in terms of, looking at these treatments and how they're applied in the clinics, and then trying to make them more accessible and getting it out into the community. And so that's where the genesis of Partners for Pain came about.
And may I ask you, I know in our work, it's very, very important for Partners for Pain to make sure we're in the community. Douglas, for example, just came in from doing some food shelf work over at North Minneapolis, but we'll get to you in a second right there, Douglas. So Brent, with your previous projects and this particular project that has so much emphasis on the community side, do you see anything different there? Was that similar to your previous projects? Is this something different? Do you like this? Could you just elaborate a little bit?
Yeah. So it's very much different from especially the earlier projects we were doing. As I mentioned, a lot of the focus is on pain management using complementary and integrative health treatments, and the people who use complementary and integrative health treatments, tend to be people with more resources, right? And so have more easily accessible to get access to these types of treatments. And so who showed up for the trials wasn't always representative of who's living in the community. And so we recognized that we had to do a better job at making even within research settings, our programs more accessible and more available. And one way to make sure it's more accessible and available is to hear what the needs are of the community and make sure that you're out in the community and hearing what they think would make it better. And so it's not like it went, from one project to the next, and it went from nothing to where we are now with Partners for Pain. It was kind of a progression with each project, doing more and more and more, and leading up to Partners for Pain, which is very much heavily involved in being in the community, hearing what people have to say, and then being responsive to that in terms of the programs and our research processes to make it easier for people to show up and engage in it.
Thank you so much. Excellent. With that, I'm going to turn over to Douglas, because Douglas had approached me a few years ago and wanted to, he was so passionate about community engagement and involvement. And we had many, many conversations. And oftentimes I would ask him, do you want community engagement, your way or my way, or how do we do it? So it's taken us a lot of conversations and just a lot of moments of also for me to understand research and how it's connected. And so, Douglas, I'd like to turn it over to you and ask you the same questions. I know you were a professor and now you're a researcher, but you're really into community engagement.
Yeah.
And so if you could please share a little bit of yourself with us.
Yeah, and a lot of this, Carmen, so thanks for that introduction. A lot of this hinges on relationships, right? That you had to get to know me and I had to get to know you. And that it's that bi-directional, listening to each other, being able to communicate that's been kind of the through line in how I came to research. Because I used to be a high school teacher. And when we think about, the teachers that we've had in our past, especially the ones that were really impactful, it's probably those teachers that made that effort to have that connection, to listen, that understood us, maybe helped us overcome, challenges, or maybe saw that spark that we had, or just really understood where we were. And so I came to be a researcher as a later career because I had a lot of questions. And I think, if you're going to be a researcher, having that curiosity, right, and to think differently, to think both broadly and deeply, and to have that, kind of that discipline and curiosity to do the work. The thing that really gets me excited is that, when I finished my PhD and was going to be a researcher, I was worried that I would be just tucked in a lab or an office. But most of the time that I get to spend is actually in conversation. Like I got to meet Jesus, Carmen, getting to know you over, how many meals and things like that. Really that listening and being able to say, okay, like I'm hearing you. Let me take this back. Here's what we're going to do. Here's what we're going to do. And then communicating, all right, here's how we're going to be using that information is really important. So, putting relationships at the center and working with community, not in a way that's just we gathered some people, but to actually show here's what's happening. Here's how we're honoring those perspectives, those insights, and putting them into practice is really important.
Yes, and I've always been very grateful. And that's our theme for our news magazine this month, gratitude. But I've always been so grateful that you have shown up. When we did a show with Ruben Rosario, who has left us to go to a better place up in heaven, and it was a miserable, cold, snowy, horrible day, and there you were. And I really appreciate it because working in community engagement, I often run into many kind-hearted people who talk a great talk, but oftentimes are not able to walk that talk. And so I so much appreciate that. I want to go back to you in a few minutes, but I do want to bring in my partner here, Eric Ortiz, who's a journalist by trade, and talk about research. If anybody has to research, it's how we get the news these days. And he wrote a marvelous introduction to the show. So I was going to read it and share it, but I really wanted to come straight from him. So if you don't mind, if Eric, if you could join us and share with us this importance of research and why now, and why is Partners for Pain really all that important? Thanks.
Yes, thank you, Carmen. It's great to be here. Research has always been important. I'm a longtime journalist, and I recently also added researcher to what I do. With the Pivot Fund, we're looking at where our underserved communities are getting their trusted news. And in the Midwest, we started looking at Minnesota and Michigan, Wisconsin, and Illinois. And research is just at the simplest level, is just a way of asking questions and finding honest, evidence-based answers, and how we learn about the world, what's working, what's not, and how we can do better. And so there's a lot of similarity between journalism, which is all about informing people, and research, which is also about informing people, but also helping people get understanding of, what that information means. And that's the kind of research we do at the Pivot Fund, and also, the kind of journalism I still practice. I'll also run a nonprofit called Strong Mind, Strong Body Foundation. It's a youth and community development organization Last year, we started the Youth Community Journalism Institute to, help strengthen communities through community journalism. And, there are, and how can we help, learn what the problems are in the community? We do that by listening to the community, engaging with the community, and then taking that information that we learn from the community, and then how can we, answer those questions, create solutions, create change. That's the goal of the kind of journalism we're teaching and the kind of journalism we're practicing. But it's interconnected with the research we do at the Pivot Fund, because that's about uncovering what the challenges are in the local media ecosystem, and then how can we, find out, what are solutions to that to make it more equitable for everybody, so the media ecosystem works for everyone. It's not working for everyone right now. So how can we make it work for everyone so that the needs of all people are met, the information needs of all people are met, the news and information needs, because information is power. And then putting that information into action is how you create change, and how you create solutions.
Is doing. When you look at Partners for Pain, do you see that happening? And could you speak a little bit about the science and research? You wrote about nearly 2,500 federal grants delayed or canceled across the United States. Could you touch upon that, and then we can go to our researchers so that they can share their thoughts?
So, the New York Times did a recent investigation that revealed that thousands of research grants from the National Institute of Health have been delayed or canceled due to political interference, or due to the current political climate. And these cuts have ripple effects across every state, including Minnesota. So that's why this research matters more than ever. It's really important to have understanding and support for ethical, inclusive research that can help provide more information to communities and people who need that information to help. That information can make people's lives better. And so that's why it's really important to have researchers like Partners for Pain, really providing information and research that can help people make their lives better, because that's really what research is all about, is how can we make the world better, make people's lives better.
And so researchers, how can you explain research to us in simple terms? In my community, we have immigrant population, monolingual. And so just having a conversation with Jesus about soccer, I got confused with what the word for referee was, as opposed to, coach. And so we had a communication glitch just over soccer. And when we talk about research, and Doug, I know that you are very adamant about making sure people understand the privacy involved. And if you could please piggyback on that and talk about creating that trust when a research project is presented to my community, for example, and even with something like Partners for Pain. If you could share a little bit about that.
Yeah, and if it's okay, I'd like to call in Brent too.
Please do.
Eric mentioned something really important around the research process, right? That dissemination that happens. So, we can look at question generation, the systematic investigation of it. And Brent, you're deeply invested in this as our principal investigator, but then getting it out there so people can understand it. And so some of the work that I do is on that dissemination piece, right? Like here, let's talk about research, what can be expected. Here's how we protect your data, right? When you share information with us, how do you know that it's going to be kept private? What's going to happen when you join a study like this? What types of questions are going to be asked? Like, for example, are we going into medical records? Are we checking documentation status? Are we looking for insurance? And addressing people's real concerns around that, about what might happen to my information, what are you going to ask me, is really important. And our team spends a lot of time, and we train the rest of our teammates on how to really listen, how to explain things so people that understand them. And I think that's really an important part of trust, right? That sometimes if we're in any job, when we're steeped in it, when we spend a lot of time, in a particular field. Maybe, you could be a cook, an auto mechanic, a teacher, an engineer, whatever it is. And you may have the lingo and the jargon, and that may mean a lot to you, but you've got to really work to make sure that someone else understands it. Or as my spouse says, like, okay, remember, I don't work in your office. So let's actually talk like human beings now. And being able to listen both to people's concerns and being able to articulate it in a way that addresses those concerns is really, really important. And Brent, I'm gonna pause there too, because I know there's a lot about the scientific pieces and the investigation that's also really important, and you're uniquely qualified to talk about that.
Yeah.
Thank you, Doug.
Well, as are you, Doug. And I think you touched on it with like when you ask the question, what is research? Like the one word that's probably the simplest that comes to my mind that has an overarching current through every process is systematic. Right. And so you start with a question, you want to understand something, and then it's about the systematic ways of going about generating knowledge to answer that question, or looking at what existing knowledge there is to answer that question. And so it gets to, if you're going to set up a study to answer a question, who's going to be in the study? That has to be systematically defined, and you have to have a good rationale for the people who are going to be in it and the people who aren't going to be in it. And then what are you looking for? Is it testing a different treatment? Is it to understand how a certain condition evolves over time? And how are you going to measure these things, right? And so you have to make sure that what you choose to measure is done so in a systematic way, at systematic time frames, and that there's validity around the things you're trying to measure, because there's a whole science around how you measure things and how to best go about that. And so that's kind of the undercurrent in all the processes. There's a systematic process, and then there's norms around it. It's like you're not just doing it by yourself, right? That there's others in your community, in peers in the scientific community, who are going to look at what you're doing and criticize or improve, give you directions to improve what you're doing. And that goes from often before you even start the project to say, how could this be better? To then when you go conduct the project and then want to report on this. Is this worthwhile to actually be reported on? And that's the process that we go through to publish our findings in scientific journals. And there's many other steps along the way where your peers are looking at the process and giving you comments on it scientifically as well as ethically, like having institutions within the university are looking at, what are you proposing to do, and do you have the best interests of the people who are going to be participating in your research in mind, and is there anything you can do to make that easier and not harm individuals?
And I think I think that point too about one of the things, if someone's not in research, right, and clinical research has a lot of rules around it. And, those rules are there for participant safety and being able to share with it, like, here's why we're doing this and explaining it. Sometimes, maybe we've had that experience where, we get sick, and if we go to the doctor and just suddenly, okay, we're just going to do this. So it's like, well, wait a second, like, tell me what's going to happen and why. And that's a really important part of, the work that Partners for Pain does in our type of research, is to make sure that people understand, what's going to happen to you, what's going to happen to your data, why we're doing it, and that this is really out of, concern for that person to behave in an ethical way, and with a concern for the people that we're working with. And then another piece of that too is that, so like Carmen, when you come to our community advisory team meetings, or when we're doing, presentations, because science is about getting the information out there, as Eric was talking about, right? We want people to know about it and share it, but it's also making sure that we're giving credit to where, people's contributions. And that's a real important piece too, both, for engendering trust and also being credible.
And so, Doug, I see the scientific end of it, and I see all of the steps that it takes just to put something out. From my perspective as a community member, When I hear, as a breast cancer survivor, and actually that's what interested me on research was when it connected. Wow, it was researchers who saved my life. And, but also I remember being asked to participate in studies, and I felt that it was very intrusive. I felt like that because I had this disease, that then it was helping somebody to kind of analyze me, but I didn't feel like it was going to be helping me. I just felt like, so I wonder, when you come into our communities, our monolingual, multicultural communities, English is not the first language. It's this, I think it's a brand new effort that Partners for Pain is doing that I haven't seen in other areas. For example, handing out food at the food shelters, and every time you turn around, there's a researcher at one of the shows. So as you do Partners for Pain, and I know we've been through one series, we've had the recruitment and people started and they finished. It's very important. Now we're on the second. Could you just speak on how you're revving up, this community effort, such as this web show, to get people to have that trust, to come in and say, yes, I have back pain, or we don't really want to, share what we have, even though we know that it's very important. And I think I've shared with you, Douglas, that when my doctor at the clinic, when they brought in a Latino oncologist, then I was like, okay, I'm into this. But before that, it was very like, that's okay, I don't know. So that importance of being able to see ourselves and to recognize ourselves, and could you speak a little bit about those wonderful efforts that Partners for Pain is really concentrating on?
Yeah, well, and I'm gonna cast some sunshine back on you for this, because we've got really committed community partners that do an outstanding job of articulating, being able to really listen, and then also being able to get the word out. And yes, we're it's the University of Minnesota, but sometimes that can mean different things to different people. So, but having it in from what we'd call folks that people recognize is really important, right? And so we work with, for example, Conversaciones de Salud. We're partnered with Centro de Tyrone Guzman. This is important to get that information out, and also from messengers that people trust. And then with that too, what our team does is that we make sure that we're outside the university walls. Like, our offices are outside of the university, because the university can be really difficult to get to, and people need to see researchers being able to like, hey, let me ask you a question. Or in some ways it's almost akin, if you were going to buy a vehicle or something from someone, like you probably wouldn't do it with the first person you met. Or if you're going to make friends with someone, it's those repeated interactions. There's a health system here that does a really great thing with their doctors, and they call it Walk with a Doctor. And they walk from their clinic, and anyone can attend. They walk their clinic down to a park, and they have a picnic, but it gives the opportunity for people to get to know that physician. And we know that sometimes when people go in the doctor's office, it's like, I don't know if I can ask questions, all this stuff. But being able to recognize people, have those conversations, ask the questions, that is really important. My own personal heart sings that when we gathered a focus group, and there were people that's like, oh yeah, I'm here because I saw you at this event and this event. You remembered me. You talked to me. We get feedback like, hey, we want to work with you because we see you working shoulder to shoulder with community members, and you're not coming out to ask for anything. It's just being part of the neighborhood. It's being part of this event and seeing people. Brent, is there anything that you'd want to add to that too? Because this is your work.
Well, just add that, that summed it up really good about the relationship side of it, right? And how important that is. And I'm struck about something you said earlier, Carmen, right? Like the my way or your way, which traditionally when you come from research, right? When you're talking about systematic, probably a synonym for that is rigid, right? Like, we have our structure, this is how it has to be. And so which makes it sound a lot like my way, right? Like this is what it is. And so trying to, there are some pieces that are systematic and you have to be structured, but when you can develop the relationships and hear from people about what the needs are and start looking at, where is there flexibility within your processes where you can open things up or make it a little easier for people to participate? Where could you devote more resources to, this is how we've done it before, but we do it before because, we don't want to expend resources over here and we save them for over here. Where can we shift some of those balances to make it more meaningful for the people who are engaging with it, and to make it more of our way? And one nice thing about Partners for Pain is while it's one project, it had 2 phases. And so we had this early kind of pilot feasibility testing phase where we were out in the community a lot, hearing from community advisory board participants just about what the needs were, what they thought of the different programs that we were testing for pain self-management, and what we could do to make it better, so that when we get to the second phase, which you're talking about now, where we're doing these different rounds of recruitment, it's taken their feedback into consideration and modified things based on what people have told us. And so not all projects get a chance to do that. And it was a nice way that this project's funded by the National Institutes of Health through their National Center for Complementary and Integrative Health Center. And they had that mechanism set up, which is a nice way to really allow for that feedback to have an immediate impact later on in the project.
Can I piggyback on that too? When Brent's talking about, we had those pilot results, we did a first run, and then we gathered information. What do people think about this? We put that on our website because we felt it was important that people should be able to see it. And what was a really important part of that is that when people gave us their feedback, we also showed them, here's what we're doing with it, right? So it doesn't just sit there. It isn't just this kind of nice to have, but it's important that people see that what they're telling us gets implemented. And Carmen, I'm going to maybe make you blush on this too, but one of the things, like I remember when you kind of had that like moment, like, oh my gosh, like I'm excited about research. But if someone were to sit in our community advisory team meetings, and we've got folks from our different community partners, community members that advise us on our recruitment. We actually came to this group to say, should we go ahead and do this grant, presented it there first, see if it would be a good fit. We're learning from each other, and that I think is really, as a former educator, I think when education's done really well, both that like there's that exchange. And I really am grateful for our partners that have been able to say, here's how I think we can improve these processes. Here's how this is going to resonate best. And I've been also really struck then by, Carmen, like you, like, tell me more about research. Like, how does this work? Because when we come together like that, in that in-between meeting place, that's hugely important, because now we're like, okay, we're learning from each other, and we can start to take away some of the barriers that are there that have existed in research.
That's exactly true. Thank you for putting it that way, because at first I thought, research, whatever. But then it was really the committee, the people sitting on that. It was, you can present anything to anyone. It's how you present it, to open up their appetite, to see if they want to. And that's how I felt. I felt like it was really presented from the heart, and it was really organic, and it was, walking the talk. And I think it's important to bring Eric in now, because I think journalism is really the key to help communicate this, to help bring in that real news where we're kind of not knowing what to listen to, what to trust, what to believe. Eric, could you speak a little bit on that, having heard how Partners for Pain really is committed, and you've seen them in action when you've done the shows at Spin and at Speak with the youth. So if you could please speak to that importance of connecting that journalism and research. Thank you.
Yeah, that something Douglas said earlier, and also Brent mentioned, was the idea of trust and trusted messengers, and it's so important, in research and journalism, but communicating, building relationships with the community so that you can earn their trust and gain their trust. So that is going to help the research, strengthen the research, because you're going to get, unfiltered, communication and insights from them. They're going to feel, more comfortable sharing. And that's what you want to get but that takes time to build those relationships and build that trust. And it, good research, like good journalism, it comes down to trust. The more people trust you, the better the information is going to be. And so developing, and getting those being a trusted messenger, that is really important.
So Conversaciones de Salud is a trusted messenger?
100%. Yeah. So, over all that time that you have spent in the community, that builds trust when people say, see you in the community and really serving the community, helping the community.
Jóvenes,
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, it's all, when people see that, then they, see you're the real deal. And it's also, you're walking the talk as you say, that's what people want to see. And that, and then, that is how, when people see that you want to help, then people want to return that. And so then it becomes a, bi-directional relationship. And that's what you want in journalism, research, and community building and everything. This is what, research helps make the community stronger. It helps make people's lives better. And, that's what it is at the basic level. And so that anybody can do that, you just have to have a commitment to really building those relationships, and then, putting, a systematic process in place, as Brent said, to how you want to execute that research. But it really starts with just at the human level, building trust and building relationships and connecting with people.
Well, thank you. I feel like, Douglas, I feel like we're right on track of what we started to talk about so long ago. And especially with journalism, as you can see from our issue this month, we talk a lot about research. And Eric, if you wouldn't mind sharing, right now, Jesus and I are over at the Masonic Institute for Brain Development.
Before I do that, I think Douglas wanted to say something.
I want to underscore just one point, if I may. That
Thank you.
What's really important is people understanding like the way that research actually benefits communities, and I think historically science has really struggled with that and that dissemination, right? That we see it as a study, but when we're looking at, for example, and I'll use Partners for Pain. I'll try to be really brief. We're looking at chronic back pain, which affects 80% of the population. It's one of the most disabling conditions in the world, and this has real impacts on families, families and individuals, and being able to articulate so when someone gives their time, and yes, we compensate people, we pay people for their time for being in these studies, but how this is contributing and why this matters is something that scientists, and I think our team is really trying to do, is to articulate that why and the impact, and it's not just that when we participate, we're doing something altruistic or just good, right? But really getting into why this is important for people. And I think, Eric, the piece that you wrote about this really got to the heart of that. So I just want to say thanks, but also acknowledging that, making that clear is really important.
Yes, and that's to me, and that's why Jesus is our youth apprentice here, is the importance of being able to get real news to our families, to our communities. In my household, the youth are very important. My parents, for example, never spoke English. And so they depended on me to bring home information. I would bring home my papers from school with a red F in a circle. And I would tell my father that was for fabuloso. And so he believed what I told him. And so that's what we're doing now. And so that's what we're doing now, is to bring that information into the household and bring it through the young people, because if we can train them or give them the right information to bring home, then it helps the family. And it helps that child or that young person, because then they feel like they are bringing something of worth, as opposed to a red F and always not, doing the right things. So the journalism infusion into Partners for Pain is very exciting for me personally. As from an article from the Pivot Fund, they called me advocate to publisher, which is such a gift. I wish my father could see that now. But it was really because I'm a storyteller, and it's really because I need to hear stories, and I need to tell stories. And journalism, through Eric, through his work and partnership, is helping us connect that. And as we talk about the future of these series and more information, Douglas, do you have anything in mind that you really want to, set as a foundation as we go on to our other series later on with our other researchers?
Mm-hmm.
And then we'll go back to the Masonic brain thing. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
And it would be okay if we turn that over to Brent too.
Yes, please.
Okay.
We're a team.
One of the things that, and we mentioned it earlier, it's come up a couple of times, is that the relationships are number one. So if this podcast, this broadcast can be part of a way where it's like, okay, I see you, I know someone who's doing research, and I can communicate, and that could be through a phone call, an email, something like that. Like, please do. And we hope that this is sort of an entryway into that larger conversation. And the next shows, I think it's like, once you kind of get a sense of like, well, what is this? How can I be involved? Like, what is this research thing? Knowing that those doors are open. And then two, and the next one will be to, well, what actually happens, right? Let's be transparent about this. And it's kind of analogous to when I was doing my doctorate, I brought my kid, who was young at the time, to campus, and they were going to go visit this brain researcher, this neurologist. And they had in their mind, like what this was going to be. And when they met the researcher and what he did, it didn't really kind of match up to their expectations. They were a little disappointed. They found out he asked a lot of questions rather than having a lot of elaborate machinery. And I don't mean that to diminish, people's concerns, but I think the importance is really in what will happen, what is it going to look like, and can I ask those questions, and will they be dignified? And that's the most important part. So the next shows, what is this going to look like? For me, when I step into, an appointment, when I agree to see what I can do to participate in helping this team figure out how we can do, understand self-management, what people can do on their own for back pain. Brent, how about you? What might you add to that?
Just that, well, I'm struck by, both you and Eric have both been talking about the importance of relationships and the importance of trust. And I just want to emphasize that, right? I think you said it, Eric, like if you don't have trust and you can't have an open, honest conversation, then what are we really doing, right? And especially when we're looking at the types of problems and the challenges that we face and that we're trying to get answers to with research, like that is a critical first step, because if you can't have an open, honest conversation, whether it be with a community partner, participants, researcher, then you're really not going to have much success no matter what you're trying to do. And so hopefully, I see this as an introduction, like this is who we are, what are the sort of things you're doing, so that, we can get to know each other and feel comfortable just talking about what our needs are, what your needs are, and where do they intersect, and what do you have going on, what do we have going on? Maybe there's a win-win for both of us that would work out. So.
That's exactly right. I think this is a good time to talk about this project we're doing, with the Masonic Institute for Developing Brain at the University of Minnesota, and they are a research institution focused on neuroscience and the brain, the developing brain from birth to end of life. And they have doing a lot of cutting edge research there. They also have a clinic, and they have a lot of services around the brain health, mental health. And so we partnered them, but we learned from them that they had a challenge, in taking all this great research and getting it outside the siloed scientific community. And so how do they reach underserved communities and communities, where this information would really have a lot of value and these resources would have a lot of value. And so we're collaborating with them on a project to help do that, to help connect to the community and to get these information about the brain and the resources of mental health to the community. And so we're going to be developing, a video series, audio series, and events to make this information accessible, to create opportunities for young people and their families to learn about brain health, connect with the resources, and be inspired to take action. So we had a event on May 15th, which was Mental Health Day. We had a mental health action festival to kick off this program, which we're calling Brain Health Solutions for All. And, we believe that everyone should have access to tools that support their well-being. And we want to help people of any age strengthen themselves and their communities through brain power. And so that kickoff event, was an opportunity for the researchers and the doctors who are part of the Institute, the Brain Institute, to meet the community. So we was at the community center. We invited the community there. We had over 100 people. It was, mostly Latino for this introduction, but we're going to be working with all communities. But it was a celebration of mental health. We had food, music, dancing, Latino and Mexican folklore dancing. And then there was an opportunity for, the doctors and researchers and experts to meet the community, and they were able to ask questions. The community members were able to ask questions and get to know them. We also had a virtual Facebook Live so that people who weren't able to make it in person could learn. And this was just the first step to building the relationships, we're talking about, and building that trust and making people aware of this great resource that's right in the, Minneapolis, that, a lot of people in the community were unaware of, don't know about. And so we're going to help make them aware of it, and then also help be a bridge, and a connector from the Institute to the community, so that, it's a two-way, bi-directional, relationships that we can build, so that both sides can benefit. All the great research and information can reach more people, and then also all the great resources and services can help more people. And so that's the, we're hoping and really optimistic that this can be a model for more, research institutions and traditional institutions that are having challenges meeting, or connecting with communities and building trust and relationships, that we can kind of create a model that can be replicable, that other people can do. Because, there's so much great information and so many people doing great work, in the science community and in educational community, but it's not, how do you get it outside the silos that exist? And that's really, what the focus of our work is. It's really about service, and it's about solutions and education. And those three components is how can we bring that to the community and make it actionable, so people can make their daily lives better, make their communities stronger.
And on that note, I have to say that Partners for Pain set the path for this opportunity with the Masonic Institute for Brain Development. It was our connection. It was Partners for Pain who invited those researchers to our web shows, and so all roads lead here. And since being with Partners for Pain, it just seems that more information has been coming and more opportunities. And so as Jesus and I sit in this beautiful room over at the center, I'm deeply appreciative, full of gratitude, since this is our mantra this month, for Partners for Pain for making that connection. And the U of M, talk about silos, the right hand does not talk to the left hand. And yet here we are, the researchers, going outside those rigid rules that are there. And so it's greatly, greatly appreciated. Doug, did you want to comment on this?
Well, I think I may be getting to your last question. The one thing that is really remarkable, and I think we're doing the science now, right? We've got our projects, we're building knowledge, but it's also having that ability to connect, not just for the researchers, but also then, and I'm thinking about youth journalism, and maybe this is my teacher bent, but it's always that next generation, right? It's the, like, how do you do your job? Like, how do I do this? Is what doors are open to me? And having those connections, having that ability to, talk to someone to see yourself in that, or to at least have a path that's evident is really important. Like when I think about whether it was a job in teaching, going to graduate school, or any of these other opportunities, it was always that I had really great, mentors or guides that I could ask questions to. And I think that's, as we build these relationships, I think that's a really important piece too, that there's not one mold for people in the sciences. We need people that think differently and with different skill sets, and that's really important. But sometimes that's not always really apparent. So I think, like the event that you had at the Institute, Eric, was a really good job. Like, here, bring folks together. Let's talk about this and see what, open up the doors and the windows and let some light in. So people,
we have to know who's who, mi casa, su casa. We hear, oh, you can come over anytime, but then when you come over, it's like, wow, I don't think I should have come over. And so these are the opportunities that when the center opened up their facilities to us, we were very honored and we're happy to bring our community so that they could feel welcomed into this building that you just go by and it looks great, but you keep on going because what is it? Who is it? What the heck is research? What are you researching me for? What's in it for you? So we have to get through all of that. And that May 15th event really set the stage. And then my feeling is that I work with the best researchers around, from Partners for Pain. So it would seem a real, just a natural opportunity to all get together and just make it a one mi casa thing. And I also want to thank you so much for Centro Guzman. I'd like to invite them to one of our conversations so that we can continue this important segue into the 101, what research is. And perhaps at the end of, at this time next year, we'll have a really good understanding. And I think that's where we will get new researchers from. It's impossible to tell a young person, get into research when, research what? And you got to get a master's and a science. And, I need to know math, and research is so much more than that. We have to research what kind of phone we're going to get, how we're going to send a package to Puerto Rico. So everything in our lives is research. And to have professional experts like yourself identifying it and breaking it down into those chewable sizes is very, very important. And I just wanted to take this opportunity and again, thank you very much. As we come to a close, we've got a few minutes. I'd like you each to take a minute and just kind of, share as we're in this tight political, they call it, environment these days, and oftentimes we lose hope. The sky is falling. Could you maybe close out the show with a little bit of hope with your closing remarks as we get ready for our next show? And Douglas, would you like to go first?
I think I heard Brent. Can I pass it up to my coworker and friend? Okay.
Absolutely. Let's put him up front.
All right.
A little bit of hope. Maybe I'll start. So one thing we haven't talked about, because research is pretty broad, right? And you mentioned it. And I think the mi casa, su casa is a good analogy, because just within research, there's lots of casas. And we don't really know what, we share a basic understanding of some commonality and some shared experience. But, what I do, and a physicist and a chemist and a basic science researcher, it's completely different worlds. And the one thing that I think, the one trait that a lot of researchers have is a passion for it, and a passion for generating knowledge and inquisitiveness. And so despite all and the other thing that's probably should be shared with people who may be interested in research is, one thing I tell them is it really has to be in your heart, because it's not really a profession where it's all glory, not a lot of work, and you work all the time, and you really have to have a passion for it to make it work. And that's the people who are in the business generally have that. And so that's I think the silver lining is that regardless what happens, that passion for generating knowledge and inquisitiveness is probably never going to be shuttered, or that flame will never go out. So.
And that passion, does that go to other projects or to other opportunities that enhance the work that you're doing now, or maybe it doesn't? Maybe it's just a passion in soccer. I'm learning a lot about soccer today. I need to do some research on that.
That's a perfect analogy, because I would say the passion is generally for the process and the knowledge that's going to be gained from it. And that's a hard thing to smother if you feel that inside you. I'm curious about things. I want to know things about this world and make discoveries about this world. Research is probably a great avenue to explore, regardless of what's going on in the world. So there's always
Thank you very much. Douglas, would you like to take it? Or?
Yeah, I mean, and I guess I'll piggyback on it, maybe take a little spur trail with it. And that's, I'm always, and maybe being an educator, I think one of the greatest things about, human beings is our capacity to learn, right? That's the thing. That's what makes us unique and beautiful. And when we think about research, I'd kind of offer two things. And like I'd said kind of at the beginning of the show, my fear coming into research after working with kids for years and years and years, for decades, was that I would be in an office and I would be alone, and, I'd lose all that connection. And instead what I found is that by building relationships and community, that I could do research in a way that lifted me up, that hit my passions. But most importantly, two things. Number one is that if, find the people that lift you up, right? And you can be and two, that you can be yourself in this, right? So finding those mentors, finding those allies that are going to encourage you, because there's a lot of room for those of us that think differently, right? I mean, so we don't have to surrender who we are when we become researchers. In fact, our uniqueness is what really helps us think and grow and be different. So, I've got my instruments in the background, like this is sort of, we can bring our whole selves to it. We don't just conform to this narrow piece. So with that like determination and that sort of embracing of who we are, like not shying away from that, there's a place for it. Just make sure you have really good allies. And maybe this is kind of one of those times where, we have that entree, that entrance into, finding people that will support you as you do this work.
Yes, I found that to be very true when I joined the CAT team. I was really surprised how authentic everybody was. Usually people, they give you a good spiel and it's really good. You want to buy the vacuum cleaner, and and then after a while it's like, wait, what happened? And so I think because Douglas, you and I had some very, very deep conversations.
Yeah.
And you've always created a safe environment for me. And I'm Brooklyn from New York. I'm Puerto Rican from Brooklyn, New York, so I've got issues. And so being able to have these conversations with you where I felt totally respected, even though I felt I wasn't being respectful to you. Yeah.
Well,
I felt I was being respected. You were giving me the respect that I was not affording you. And I really wanted to thank you for that.
Well, and I think you bring up a real good point too. Like, sometimes when we have relationships, it's not all, wine and roses, right? It's we have difficulties, but if you have that where you know each other and you can build in that trust, you can navigate a lot. So, because we put the time in, to be colleagues, to be, to really listen, we were going to weather that, even if it was tough, you know, and that's
you did.
an important piece. And I thank you for bringing that up.
And you did. And also, it's time to close it, but could you please say goodbye to Jesus and a word of encouragement? And Eric, thank you very much for your leadership.
Yeah. Last point. I just want to say how important research is. You know, the work that Partners for Pain, Doug and Brent are doing is so important. But all research is important. You know, it really is how all decisions are made every day. The same for journalism. You know, it's information, and this information, being more informed, is how we make better decisions. You know, and from everything from our health to schools to communities, it's all based on data and research. And you know, we want to demystify what research is and make it more accessible to everyone. And that's what this program is doing. You know, Partners for Pain. You know, that's what we want to do with our youth community journalism program. You know, is really create solutions that are rooted in evidence, fact-based information, science, stuff that affects everyone. And really be open to learning and being having a curious, being open to just being curious. And this is for anyone. Anyone can get involved, get more people involved in research, get more people interested in questioning, to get answers, to get solutions. This moment right now, that we're living, there's challenges, but challenges can bring opportunities. It's just how you look at it and how you approach it. And that's what we are, that's kind of journalism we're practicing and teaching with our youth and the community. It's an intergenerational program, but it's really having a solutions mindset. Together, we can solve anything.
All right. Thank you so much. And I want to thank Jesus Rojas here. He has been my inspiration. And Jesus, these are our researchers. I'm so happy you got to meet them. I believe we're at the end of the hour. I just want to thank you again from de mi corazón por la oportunidad. And I look forward to our next show with our other researchers and get this conversation on the road here. So muchísimas gracias.
Muchísimas
Happy
gracias.
Father's Day to everybody out there. And Pepe, thank you very much for helping with the StreamYard production of Conversaciones de Salud. Adios.
Yeah, thank you, guys. Thank you for being here. I think that's an excellent new meeting monthly, so thank you. I just want to let you know you will part of the next issue for July. This meeting will be a page in this issue, so thank you. Excellent job. See you next time.
Gracias. Think soccer.